The wind came first, dry, endless, sharp as a knife. Dust rolled across the plains, hissing against the warped boards of the shack. Inside, the last light of day leaked through a broken shutter, painting the room in blood-orange streaks. Clara stood barefoot on the creaking floor, hands clenched, chin high, though her breath trembled. Bootsteps struck the porch, heavy, uneven. The door slammed open and Ezekiel Crane staggered in, stinking of whiskey and horse sweat. His eyes were coal-black, rimmed with fury. "You think you're better than me?" His voice cracked like a whip. Clara held her ground. "I just want peace," he sneered, bottle dangling from his fist. "Peace? Ain't no peace for a mouthy girl who forgets who feeds her." The bottle shattered against the wall, glass skittering like stars across the dirt floor. He lunged, one hand a claw. Clara's shoulder struck the doorframe as she dodged. Pain flared. The smell of liquor burned her nose. Outside, the prairie wind howled, a wild chorus against the violence inside. Ezekiel grabbed her arm, fingers bruising. "You'll stay put, or the coyotes can have what's left of you." Clara wrenched free, breath ragged. "I am not yours." He laughed, a low, bitter sound, and shoved her hard. She hit the porch rail, knees scraping wood, and tumbled into the dust. The world tilted, sky swallowing her whole. Above, the storm gathered strength. Dust devils spun like ghosts. She pulled herself upright, chest heaving, and whispered to the endless horizon, "Don't let the wind take me." For a heartbeat, the land answered only with silence. Then a single shutter banged open, a hollow clap that echoed like a warning. Ezekiel mounted his horse, the animal snorting clouds into the cooling dusk. "Worthless," he spat, turning his back. "See if the night wants you." The hooves faded into the dark, leaving Clara alone with the roar of the prairie. Her hair whipped across her face, grit stung her eyes. She hugged herself, small against the endless wild, the cold settling in where fear had burned. Above, the first stars flickered, distant and unblinking. The wind howled again, carrying her whispered plea into the wide, merciless night. The sun climbed like a hammer, beating the earth flat and pale. Clara's wrists burned where the rawhide cut into her skin, each breath tasting of dust and copper. Ezekiel had dragged her from the shack before dawn, silent except for the rasp of his boots on stone. Now he stood over her in the dry creek bed, shadow stretching long and cruel. "You'll learn," he said, voice low as gravel. "Desert teaches faster than I can." Clara met his eyes, though the heat shimmered between them. "You can't own me." He smirked, spit into the sand. "Coyotes don't care who owns what." With a hard tug, he cinched the knot tighter, rawhide biting deep. Then he turned, mounted his horse, and rode off without another word. The rhythm of hooves faded until only the buzzing of flies and the hiss of wind remained. The day bled forward, white and endless. Sweat dried as soon as it formed. Her lips cracked, her tongue swelled thick as leather. Overhead, a vulture traced a slow black circle. She fought the panic rising in her chest. Stay awake, stay alive. Memories flickered, her mother's voice humming an old lullaby, the scent of cedar smoke in winter. She held them like stones against the weight of the sun. Hours crawled. The ground radiated heat until it seemed to breathe. Rattlesnakes whispered in the brush. Shadows shrank to nothing. Clara tugged at the knots until skin split. Blood welled, dark and sticky, but the bindings held. She pressed her cheek to the cracked earth, hoping for a breath of cool, finding only the bitter taste of dust. The world narrowed to sound, her own heartbeat, slow and stubborn. A hob. WK screamed far above, sharp enough to pierce the haze. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Not like this. Not today." The words rasped like sandpaper. When she opened them again, the sky wavered, a trembling ocean of heat. Shapes swam at the horizon, mirage or salvation, she couldn't tell. Her strength ebbed with the sun. Evening shadows stretched, long and merciful. She let her head sink into the sand, the earth's cool finally seeping into her bones. "Don't let the wind take me," she breathed, a final plea to the darkening sky. And then the desert fell silent, holding her between night and nothingness. The prairie evening burned gold, then bruised to violet as Jonas McAllister guided his bay mare along the trail. A lantern swung from his saddle horn, throwing slow arcs of light across mesquite and stone. The day's heat still clung to the earth, but night's cool breath pressed in from the east. A flicker caught his eye, something pale against the dark scrub. He pulled the reins, horse snorting. The lantern beam slid across cracked ground and settled on a shape too still to be animal. Jonas dismounted, boots crunching gravel. "Hello?" His voice broke the hush. No answer, only the sigh of wind. Closer now. A young woman lay curled in the dust, wrists bound raw, skin chalked with grit. Her chest rose in shallow tremors. "Sweet mercy," he muttered. Knife flashed as he cut the rawhide. Her pulse beat faint beneath his fingers, weak but there. Lids fluttered, a rasp of breath. "Don't let the wind take me." "You're safe now," he said, low and steady. "Not on my watch." He slid his coat beneath her head, draped a wool blanket over her shoulders, careful to keep it low and gentle. She shivered like a foal in winter, but her eyes, when they cracked open, held stubborn fire. "Name's Jonas," he offered, lifting her with practiced strength. "We're heading home." Her voice was barely a thread. "Clara." The mare shifted under their combined weight as Jonas mounted with Clara held against him. He kept the lantern high, its warm surge, quickly pushing back the dark. Behind them, coyotes yipped, faint, hungry, distant. The ride stretched slow across the empty land. Stars pricked the sky, cold and watchful. Clara's head rested against his chest. He felt every thin breath like a fragile promise. At last the ranch house rose from the prairie, windows glowing amber. Jonas swung down, carrying her inside. The scent of coffee and saddle soap wrapped the room in quiet welcome. He settled her near the hearth, firelight painting soft gold across bruised skin. "You're safe," he repeated, more to himself than her. Clara's eyes found the flame, a spark of defiance still alive. The wind howled outside, but inside the walls of the old ranch, silence held, a shelter against the vast, merciless night. Night had settled deep over the ranch, stars pricking cold holes in the velvet sky. Lanterns swayed gently on the porch, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the worn boards. Inside, Clara sat near the hearth, the warmth seeping slowly into her bruised shoulders. Every creak of the floor, every sigh of wind through the gaps in the walls made her flinch. Bootsteps struck the gravel outside, sharp, deliberate. Jonas was already on the porch, rifle in hand, lantern held low. The wind carried the scent of whiskey and sweat before the man appeared. Ezekiel Crane emerged from the darkness, teeth bared, eyes wild with the certainty of ownership he believed he had. "She's mine, always will be," he spat, voice ragged with anger. Jonas stepped forward, calm but unyielding. "Not tonight, not ever again." Ezekiel slammed his fist into the door frame, wood splintering under the blow. The lantern light flickered violently, throwing Jonas's shadow tall across the porch. His hand rested lightly on the rifle, ready, but not yet raised. Clara's hands clenched the blanket around her, knuckles white, the firelight reflected in her wide eyes defiant despite the fear gnawing in her chest. "Open the door," Ezekiel growled. "You think you can hide her from me?" Jonas's voice cut through the night, low and steady. "You're leaving. Now." The outlaw's laugh was a bitter rasp echoing across the prairie. He stepped closer, boots crunching the gravel, and the wind seemed to curl around him like smoke. But the glint of the rifle, the unwavering stance of Jonas, the quiet courage in Clara's gaze, held him at bay. For a long moment the night stretched taut, wind whipping dust across the porch. Then, with a curse, Ezekiel backed away. "This ain't over," he spat, retreating into the dark. His horse whinnied and hooves pounded as he vanished beyond the mesquite line. Silence settled like a blanket, heavy and still. Jonas kept the rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness until he was sure the threat had faded. Clara exhaled, shoulders trembling. "He'll be back," she whispered. Jonas nodded grimly. "He will, but we'll be ready." Outside, the prairie wind carried only the sigh of the night, and for the first time since she had been left in the dust, Clara felt the faint stirrings of hope. The ranch, battered and quiet, had become her refuge against the storm. Dawn stretched slow over the prairie, pale light spilling across the horizon like blood on sand. Jonas rode hard, the mare's hooves hammering rhythm into the quiet morning. Behind him, Clara clung to his back, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, eyes wide and alert. The night's terror still lingered in her bones, cold as the dew on the mesquite. "The sheriff," Jonas said, voice steady but low. "She'll know what to do." Clara nodded, lips pressed tight. "Do you think he'll come?" "He'll come," Jonas replied. "Justice rides on more than fear." The town rose slowly from the dust, wooden buildings leaning against one another like weary travelers, horses stamped and nicked, dust curling around hooves as the pair rode through the empty streets. Lanterns swung in doorways, catching the dawn in amber pools. Jonas tethered the mare and led Clara toward the sheriff's office. Sheriff Miriam Tate emerged, tall and solid as a redwood, her badge gleaming faintly in the morning light. She studied Clara with sharp, assessing eyes, then turned to Jonas. "Tell me everything," she said, voice clipped, no room for hesitation. Jonas recounted the horror, the bindings, the desert, the threats, the bruises. Clara's small voice broke in, each word a fragile thread of courage. He left me to die," she whispered. "But I fought." Sheriff Tate nodded once. "We'll make sure he pays. Frontier law may be slow, but it reaches." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys, of coffee brewing, of the promise of action. Clara inhaled it deeply, and for the first time she felt the tight knot of fear loosen just a little. Jonas rested a hand on her shoulder. "We're not alone, Clara. The law is on our side now." The sheriff's gaze hardened. "He won't escape this time. Not with us watching." Clara closed her eyes, letting the first fragile thread of hope curl into her chest. The prairie, once a prison of wind and dust, now seemed wide enough to breathe in again. She could imagine herself moving forward, not running, not hiding, but standing against the storm that had nearly claimed her. Jonas mounted, and together they turned back toward the ranch. Behind them, the town woke slowly, the sun rising over a land that could be cruel, but could also carry the promise of justice, of protection, and of a new beginning. Night draped the prairie in a heavy, suffocating black. The wind whispered like a predator through the mesquite, carrying with it the smell of smoke and the distant rumble of hooves. Clara sat by the hearth, the fire flickering shadows across her bruised face, hands tight around the blanket. Her eyes darted to every crow, eek of the old ranch, every groan of timber in the settling darkness. "They're coming," she whispered, voice barely audible over the wind. Jonas stepped to the porch, rifle ready, lantern low in his other hand. His boots creaked on the boards, each step deliberate, steady. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the darkness, shapes emerged, Ezekiel Crane and two rough-looking outlaws, torches flaming, eyes glittering with intent. "She's mine," Ezekiel growled, voice slicing through the wind. "And no one can stop me." Jonas didn't flinch. "I said not tonight," he replied, tone flat and unwavering. The outlaws' horses pawed the ground, snorting, hooves stamping. Shadows leapt across the ranch walls as the firelight and torches collided, a violent ballet of menace. Clara rose, hands shaking as she gripped the shotgun Jonas had placed within her reach. Fear and defiance coiled together in her chest. Ezekiel stepped forward, torchlight casting his cruel grin. "Open the door, Jonas, or it'll get ugly." Jonas tightened his hold on the rifle. "You've already lost." The first shot rang, splintering the porch rail. Horses bolted, hooves clattering against packed dirt. The outlaws returned fire, the night erupting in sparks, smoke, and shouts. Clara's fingers tightened around the shotgun, heart hammering. The wind howled through broken shutters, carrying the scent of gunpowder and the acrid bite of fear. Jonas moved like a shadow himself, positioning, blocking, holding the line. Clara's eyes met his, silent reassurance, shared determination. The torches flickered, casting grotesque dancing figures across the walls, but the defenders held their ground. Every shot, every breath was a struggle against the night, against the predators who thought the law and courage could be bent or broken. When the firing ceased for a moment, only the wind spoke, carrying the scent of smoke, the cries of horses, and the promise of dawn yet to come. Clara sank to the floor, trembling but alive. Jonas's eyes never left the darkness, just beyond the porch. This was the night of assault, the crucible of fear, but also the night where survival, courage, and the faint glimmer of hope began to carve a path through the shadows. The prairie night shattered with the distant rumble of hooves and the clink of spurs. Jonas kept Clara close behind him, eyes scanning the darkness, rifle cradled but ready. Every shadow seemed to twitch with menace, every gust of wind carrying the smell of smoke and danger. Then, piercing the black, lantern beams bobbed across the horizon. Sheriff Miriam Tate and two deputies galloping fast, voices sharp as the whip of a horse's tail. "Hold your fire!" the sheriff shouted, her voice carrying across the open land, firm and commanding. Ezekiel and his companions froze mid-step, torches flickering wildly. The outlaw's eyes widened at the sudden intrusion, the unyielding authority of the law. Jonas kept his aim steady, fingers tightening on the rifle. Clara clutched her blanket, heart hammering, breath catching in the chill night air. The sheriff dismounted, boots crunching gravel. "Step away from the girl, Crane," she said, badge catching the faint moonlight. "You're under arrest." Ezekiel spat, the gesture more defiance than fear. "This ain't over," he snarled, brandishing a pistol. Jonas stepped forward, voice low but firm. "It's over for you." Gunfire erupted, short, sharp, and chaotic, but the law arrived with precision. Deputies circled, cutting off escape routes. Shots echoed, splintering wood, tossing up dust and grit. Clara pressed herself against the porch, the warmth of the lantern and Jonas's presence a thin shield against terror. A final shot rang out and silence fell heavy as the desert night. Ezekiel lay disarmed, shackled by the deputies, his threats now hollow in the face of authority. His companions followed suit, caught in the net of law that finally tightened around them. Clara exhaled, trembling, as Jonas helped her to her feet. The wind seemed to shift, softer now, carrying away the acrid scent of gunpowder and replacing it with the faint, clean promise of dawn.